December 20th, 1944. Somewhere in the frozen gut of the Ardennes. Snow didn't fall that day. It attacked, whipped sideways by a merciless wind that erased roads, swallowed forests, and buried men alive in drifts of silence. Private First Class Levi Conincaid pressed himself into the shallow cover of a snowbank, feeling the cold crawl through his bones like a parasite. In his hand he held a small brass compass. It looked ridiculous in a place like this, cheap, dented, barely larger than a silver coin. Not army issue, not even close. It was a farewell gift from his aunt back in Maine, bought for maybe $1 from a general store. The kind of compass a Boy Scout troop leader might hand out on a camping trip, right before telling ghost stories. A week ago, the men had laughed at it. One sergeant said it belonged in a cereal box. Another asked if it pointed to candy. Someone called it that stupid toy. But that stupid toy was the only reason Levi knew where he was, and where death would arrive from in less than a minute. Somewhere beyond the bend in the whiteout, the ground trembled. A low metallic growl rolled through the trees like thunder trapped inside steel. Tank engines, heavy ones, German. Levi could feel the vibrations in his teeth. He flicked a glove across the compass face, wiping away a smear of ice. The needle settled. 196 degrees, exactly as he'd calculated. That bearing told him everything. Where the road curved, where the 1st Panzer would expose its weakest armor, and where his single desperate ambush might actually work, if luck stayed quiet and fear behaved. Levi shut his eyes for half a breath, running through the plan one last time in his head. The buried mines, the fake jeep tracks, the kill zone, every detail built from angles and instinct. Then he whispered into the wind, steady, controlled, unshaken. Let's see if they still think it's stupid.
4 days earlier, none of this was supposed to happen. On December 16, 1944, while most Allied commanders believed the German army was too broken to launch another major offensive, Hitler proved them wrong. At dawn, without warning, the quiet forests of Belgium erupted under the largest artillery barrage the Western Front had seen since D-Day. Then came the armor, columns of panzers surging out of the mist, like the return of a storm no one thought possible. Berlin called it Unternehmen Wacht am Rhein, Operation Watch on the Rhine, a poetic name for a brutal gamble. Smash through the thin American lines in the Ardennes, seize the Belgian port of Antwerp, and shatter the Allied front in a single stroke. If it worked, Germany might force a negotiated peace. If it failed, the Reich would bleed out for good. The Americans on the line had no idea such an offensive was coming. The Ardennes was considered a quiet sector, a place where exhausted divisions rotated in to rest. Teenagers straight out of boot camp guarded crossroads next to veterans recovering from wounds. They were scattered, undersupplied, and suddenly trapped in the path of over 300,000 German troops and more than 1,400 tanks and assault guns. But the terrain did not care about Hitler's plans. The Ardennes was a maze of steep ridges, ice-choked rivers, and twisted roads barely wide enough for a farm wagon, let alone mechanized war. Snow fell in suffocating waves, grounding Allied air support. Forests crowded the road so tightly that you could lose a whole army behind the trees. In battle maps, this region was marked by a single phrase: movement, slow; visibility, poor; danger, everywhere, which is why Levi's position and his compass mattered so much. He and a handful of engineers and infantrymen were dug in along one nameless road outside a half-forgotten Belgian village. Nothing glamorous. No headquarters star on the map, just a narrow, frozen stretch of dirt that nobody cared about, until the German advance threatened to use it as a fast route to break the entire American line. If Levi and his men could delay even one German armored element by an hour, by half a day, it might be enough to buy time. In a battle where miles mattered less than minutes, time was the deadliest weapon of all. Before the war, Levi Conincaid had never seen a battlefield. He had barely seen beyond the borders of Maine. He grew up in a small lumber town where winters were long, conversation was short, and no one complained because no one expected life to be easy. His father spent his days wrestling pine and spruce out of the forests. His mother opened a diner before sunrise and fed half the county by noon. Quiet families, hard work, no fuss. Levi fit that world. Steady hands, calm voice, the kind of young man who didn't speak unless there was a reason. But he saw things differently. Where most people saw woods, Levi saw direction, patterns, bearings, angles. He wasn't a dreamer, he was a measurer. At 16, he worked as a surveyor's assistant, pacing off property lines deep in the timber country. While other boys drove logging trucks or split firewood, Levi walked miles with a notebook, folded maps, and a brass compass hanging from a cord around his wrist. He learned the language of terrain, how a slight dip meant water flow, how a ridgeline could hide you, how a 2-degree mistake in direction could put you miles off course. He learned above all that the earth didn't lie. People did, memory did, fear did, but a compass needle, never. When he enlisted in 1943, the Army didn't drop him into a rifle squad like most replacements. They put him with the combat engineers, the men who built bridges under fire, blew roads to slow armor, and carried rifles only when everything else went to hell. It wasn't a glamorous job, but Levi didn't need glory. He needed purpose. In training, other soldiers had raw strength or loud confidence. Levi had precision. He could read battlefield maps like second nature. He could find a path when everyone else swore there wasn't one. His platoon sergeant joked he must have witchcraft in his blood, compass voodoo they called it. The little brass compass he carried in the Ardennes wasn't standard gear. It wasn't even reliable half the time. The needle jittered if you moved too fast. His aunt had pressed it into his hand the day he boarded the train at Bangor Station. "Something to keep you pointed home," she'd said with a smile that almost hid her worry. The men laughed at it. A toy compass. A joke. Something a kid would win at a summer fair. But Levi didn't laugh. He knew the truth no one else bothered to think about. When the clouds swallowed the stars and radios went dead and maps didn't match the land, then a toy that always pointed north was worth more than luck. And in December 1944, that compass was about to prove it. By the middle of December 1944, Levi Conincaid wasn't fighting with his original unit anymore. The chaos of the offensive had shattered old formations and thrown together fragments of whatever forces were still standing. Levi now found himself attached to a scratch-built engineer platoon supporting an infantry company from the 106th Infantry Division, green troops on their first real taste of war. Their orders were simple and brutal. Hold a narrow road outside the Belgian village of Houffalize. That frozen strip of dirt hadn't mattered a week earlier. It was just another road bending through pines. But now it had become a doorway to disaster. If the Germans punched through it, they could circle behind American defenses and carve a hole in the Allied line wide enough to drive a Panzer army through. There were maybe 30 men holding that position. No tanks, no artillery, no backup worth mentioning. Just a scattering of cold, hollow-eyed soldiers clinging to one road that suddenly mattered. Their equipment looked like a museum of bad odds. One 57mm M1 anti-tank gun, small, light, and nearly obsolete against German armor, 2 bazookas. Both low on rockets, a couple crates of mines, not nearly enough rifles and grit. Too much of one, never enough of the other. Across the forest from them waited reality. German Panzer IVs, maybe even Panthers. Those machines weighed 25 tons, carried 75mm cannons, and had enough armor to laugh at a head-on shot. The only way to kill one was to hit it from the side, and only if you were stupid, brave, or desperate enough to get close. The ground was frozen so solid it might as well have been iron. Digging proper defenses was impossible. Trenches? No chance. They tried to bury mines, but the frost turned shovels into useless sticks. Every man was sleep-starved, underfed, and shaking from more than just the cold. Their commanding officer, Lieutenant Parker, was new. Too new. The kind of leader who still believed in the rulebook. He ordered the usual textbook defense, set the gun facing down the road, lay a few mines, pray hard. Levi stared at that plan and tasted failure. A frontal defense against tanks, that wasn't a strategy. That was a death wish. He stepped away from camp, map in one hand, compass in the other. No one followed. No one asked why. They assumed he was lost. But Levi wasn't wandering. He was measuring. He walked the terrain. He studied the curve of the road. He counted paces, tracked angles, watched where a tank would have to slow, where a barrel couldn't rotate, where steel would be forced to turn blind. He didn't see chaos. He saw a solution. And when he came back, he brought with him a plan that would save lives and get laughed at first. Levi spread his map across an ammo crate inside the command tent. Snow still clung to his helmet, and his breath fogged the air as he set his compass down on the paper. Lieutenant Parker and half a dozen exhausted soldiers stared at him like he had dragged in a dead animal. "I've got a better way to hold this road," Levi said, voice steady. Parker raised an eyebrow. "Better than pointing the gun forward and praying?" Levi tapped a spot on the map. "There's a bend, 196 degrees southwest from here. Tanks coming through have to turn. When they do, they show their left side. That's our shot." A couple of men chuckled. Someone in the back muttered, "Compass boy is back." Parker frowned at Levi's compass, the small brass one with the cracked glass face. "You're basing this on that thing?" Levi didn't blink. "I'm basing it on terrain. The compass just proves it." More laughter. One private snorted. "What's next?" "We follow the North Star." Levi ignored them and kept going. He laid out his plan. Not bold, not reckless, just precise. Move the 57mm anti-tank gun off the road. Conceal it along a snow-covered ridge overlooking the bend. Angle it to hit a Panzer broadside as it turned ley mines beyond the bend. Not to stop tanks, but to control their movement. Use a fake retreat as bait, tire tracks, debris, maybe even a wreck to lure the enemy forward without scouting. That's guesswork, one soldier argued. "No," Levi said calmly. "That's geometry." He'd already walked it, paced it, and measured every line of fire. The shot window would only last 5 seconds, but 5 seconds could kill a tank. If they missed that moment, they were finished. Parker stared at the map. He wanted to dismiss it. Levi could see that in his eyes. It was unorthodox, messy, nothing like the manuals taught. Then Parker glanced at the men. They were tired, cold, scared. Fear needed direction. Levi was giving it one.
Finally, Parker exhaled. "It's a long shot. So is fighting tanks with one gun," Levi replied. Silence. Then Sergeant Wilkes cracked a grin. "Well," he said, "if we're gonna die, might as well die with style." There were a few nods, a few shrugs, no enthusiasm, just acceptance. It was enough. The lieutenant gave the smallest of nods. "Do it." And just like that, the stupid idea became the only plan they had. The sky closed in early that evening, the kind of dark that arrives with a storm and refuses to leave. Snow fell thicker now, each flake heavy enough to mute sound. The forest pressed close, a ring of silent trunks that seemed to watch the men work. They hauled the 57mm like a stubborn animal, grunting, slipping, breath steaming. Wheels scraped frozen ruts, metal whined against packed snow. Levi stayed close to the gun, guiding the crew into a hollow behind a ridgeline where brush and drift would hide their silhouette. The ground was iron under their shovels, so they packed snow and branches to build a firmer firing platform rather than dig a proper pit. Someone tossed a blanket over the muzzle to slow the ice. Fingers turned numb and clumsy. Curses were low and constant, but beneath the jokes and the shivering, a new focus grew, careful, silent, sharp. Down the road, a different team worked on deception. They dragged a burned-out Jeep carcass into a shallow ditch just past the curve and stomped boot prints and tire tracks through the fresh snow, leading right past it. A ripped tarp was hung on a low branch, fluttering in the wind like a wounded flag. Everything was staged to send a single message to a passing crew. Americans left in a hurry. Nothing to fear here. The mine team moved like ghosts. With frozen ground, they couldn't bury charges deep. Instead, they tucked explosives shallowly under powdered snow and masked them with needles and twigs, leaving a coded pattern only they would recognize. The devices weren't perfect deterrents. They were bait to nudge vehicles where Levi wanted them to go.
Behind a thicket of firs, the bazooka crew settled in, two shaky teams with two shaky rockets left between them. Their orders were narrow and precise. Wait for the second tank to try to maneuver, then hit the treads. Disable, don't necessarily destroy. Stop movement and kill momentum. Levi paced the last time, counting steps between the ridge and the bend, tracing arcs with his boot. He checked the compass a dozen times, each reading the same, 196 degrees. He cross-checked it on the map, then on the land itself. Every wire, every piece of debris, every broken track had been placed to create one small window of advantage. They moved quietly into position as night closed. The cold sharpened each man's senses. The jokes faded into a steady, concentrated hush. Even the skeptics kept closer to Levi now, watching him with a new, wary curiosity rather than scorn. When Levi finally slipped behind the gun, the world was nothing but a circle of dark and a distant road swallowed by snow. He tucked the compass back into his palm and felt its weight like an anchor. This wasn't theater anymore. This was patience waiting for a single brutal measurement to prove it true. The night had a pulse now. It began as a faint tremor beneath the snow, a vibration so distant it could have been imagined, until it wasn't. The men felt it through their elbows, braced on frozen ground, through rifle stocks pressed against their shoulders. Something massive was coming. Levi lay flat behind the 57 millimeter, cheek against the icy metal of the gun shield. He didn't need to look to know his crew was ready. The loader cradled the first shell like a newborn. The gunner kept his finger hovering near the trigger, waiting for a single word. No one spoke. There were no jokes now. Whatever fear remained, it had gone silent. The sound arrived before the shapes did. A Panzer engine didn't rumble like American armor. It snarled. It was a deep mechanical growl with a strained whine that made your teeth ache. Every training manual said the same thing. Recognize that sound, and you'll know death is close. The forest swallowed visibility to 30 feet at best. Snow churned in the air like ash. Then, movement. A hulking shadow emerged through the veil of white. One moment it wasn't there, then suddenly it was, materializing from the fog like a ship breaking through storm surf. Steel, angled armor, painted camouflage smeared with frost, a black iron cross barely visible beneath a skin of ice. Panzer IV, just as Levi predicted, and behind it, another, maybe even a third. Levi didn't reach for the compass. He didn't need to. He could feel the angle of the road in his bones now. Everything he mapped was unfolding in real time. The first tank crawled toward the bend. Its commander stood half exposed in the open hatch, scanning ahead with binoculars. Levi knew what he saw. Abandoned jeep, scattered tracks, no enemy in sight. A perfect invitation to roll straight into the kill zone. The German turret didn't turn. They weren't expecting a fight here. Why would they? Americans were supposed to be retreating. The trap was working. Levi raised his hand, signal ready. Behind him, the loader drew a slow breath. The gunner glanced at Levi, waiting for that hand to fall. But Levi wasn't watching the tank, not yet. He was timing the road, timing the hesitation, timing the exact second momentum became vulnerability. The Panzer hit the curve and turned left. There. The armor peeled open, exposed flank, 5 seconds of weakness. Levi held his hand in the air for just one more heartbeat. Almost. Levi dropped his hand. The night split open. The 57 millimeter cannon roared like thunder in a canyon, the recoil slamming backward as the shell screamed across the curve of the road. A heartbeat later, impact. A blast of sparks and metal tore from the Panzer's flank, right where engine and armor met. The tank spasmed, lurched, and belched smoke from its rear vents. One tread locked, the other kept grinding, dragging the massive machine sideways until it blocked the road at an angle. Direct hit. Shouts erupted inside the steel beast, muffled German voices barking orders, or panic. The turret jerked violently, but the gun still couldn't swing far enough to see Levi's crew, just like he calculated. The forest trembled to life. The second Panzer braked hard, gears shrieking as the driver tried to reverse. Snow exploded under its treads. That was exactly what the bazooka team had been waiting for. A whoomp echoed through the trees. The cough of a bazooka firing from cover. A streak of fire tore into the night and smashed into the second tank's tread housing with a brutal metallic crack. Armor shattered. The tread snapped free and flailed like a broken chain before slamming into the snow. The giant machine spun helplessly, half immobilized. Not destroyed, but trapped. In less than 10 seconds, 2 armored vehicles, beasts meant to crush defenses, were dead in the snow. And they had been beaten by geometry, timing, and a compass everyone had mocked a day earlier. The gunner turned to Levi. "Reload?" Levi didn't answer. He was already sighting the next shot. The ridgeline erupted into chaos. Smoke poured from the crippled lead Panzer, black against the white of the forest. Its turret still twitched in mechanical panic, hunting for a target it couldn't see. The 57mm barked again, another brutal crack that shook the snow from the branches above. The shell punched into the tank just below the turret ring. Armor plate split open with a scream of tearing steel. Something inside detonated, fuel maybe, or hydraulics. Not the ammunition, not yet, but enough to make survival a bad bet. A hatch flew open. The German commander tumbled into the snow, clutching his ribs. Another crewman followed, coughing so hard he nearly collapsed. Smoke clawed at their clothes and faces. "Finish 'em!" someone yelled. The loader reached for another shell, but Levi grabbed his arm. "Hold," he ordered. "What? They're bailing!" Which means they're done. Behind them, the second Panzer had found its voice. Trapped and burning, it raked the tree line with machine gun fire, desperate and blind. Splinters of wood and snow burst around the American positions. The bazooka team fired again. Another flash, another shriek of metal tearing apart. Flames crawled across the engine deck, bright and vicious. The turret hatch blew open. One crewman climbed out already on fire, his coat a torch. He fell to the snow and rolled, screaming. 2 American soldiers broke cover, rifles raised. One of them, Dale, a farm kid from Missouri who hadn't slept in 2 days, had eyes full of fury. He stormed toward the kneeling German tank commander, finger tight on the trigger. Levi was faster. He slid down the embankment and blocked the shot, shoving Dale's barrel aside just as the trigger snapped. "What the hell are you doing?" Dale shouted. "He'd kill us." Levi stepped between them and the prisoner, voice level, unmoving. "He's surrendering." "I don't care." "I do." The German was shaking, hands raised, whispering in broken English. "Nick Cheeson, no shoot, done. Finished." Levi stared at him. For a moment there was nothing. No sides, no flags, no hate. Just 2 men still alive by accident. He lowered Dale's rifle. The forest went quiet again. Not peaceful, not safe. Just quiet in that frightening way a battlefield pauses before it becomes a memory. Restraint wasn't part of the plan, but it's what made Levi different. By dawn, the battle was over, but the cold was not. The wrecked Panzer sat dead and frozen across the narrow road, hulking metal corpses streaked black by fire and smoke. Frost crept over their steel, like nature reclaiming them. One blocked the road from the front, the other from the rear. Together they formed a wall that nothing could move, not quickly, not today. Levi stood on the ridge, compass still in his hand. Now that the shooting was done, the weight of everything hit him at once. Numb fingers, burning lungs, exhaustion that settled deep into the bones. He hadn't realized how long he'd been holding his breath until now. No one cheered, no one celebrated. Victory here didn't feel like triumph. It felt like surviving a fall off a cliff. Sergeant Wilkes was the first to speak. "Well, Compass," he muttered, voice low but steady. "Looks like your stupid idea bought us a hell of a lot of time." He wasn't smiling when he said it. But there was respect there. Real respect. The kind you don't give away unless it's earned. Word came in over a crackling field radio a short time later. German units had been planning to push a support column through this very road to reinforce the spearhead toward Bastogne. Now that column was stuck. With 2 burning tanks blocking the path, it would take at least 6 hours to clear the way. Longer if they didn't have the right equipment on hand. 6 hours was life or death in this battle. Reinforcements could reposition, artillery could move, lines could be restored, and somewhere someone else would get a chance to fight back instead of retreat. The win didn't get a headline. There were no medals, no handshakes from generals, just a brief typed line in the operations log at division headquarters later that day. Enemy armor halted at Junction Whiskey 12. Road impassable. Hold successful. That was it. One cold official sentence that didn't mention Levi Conincaid or his map or the cheap brass compass everyone had mocked. It didn't say how a handful of exhausted men held their ground long enough to matter, but the men who were there knew, and they would remember. The Battle of the Bulge didn't turn on a single moment. It didn't swing because of one heroic charge or a dramatic last stand. It shifted the way glaciers move, slowly, painfully, pushed by countless small forces working together. Levi's ambush was one of those forces. While his unit held the junction near Hufeleis, another American squad a few miles west blew a bridge just minutes before German half-tracks reached it, delaying them 3 hours. Farther south, paratroopers from the 101st Airborne refused to abandon a crossroads outside Bastogne, holding off wave after wave of armor. In the north, engineers felled trees along mountain roads, choking entire columns into standstill. Each delay stacked on the next like bricks in a wall, hours stolen, momentum shattered. The German plan depended entirely on speed. Their fuel reserves were dangerously low. Their artillery was fragmented. Communications were breaking down in the snowstorm, but if they could reach the Meuse River by day 4, they might split the Allied lines before reinforcements could arrive. They didn't make it. Levi didn't know it yet, but his ambush helped make sure of that. The narrow road he blocked was a planned supply artery for the 5th Panzer Army. With it shut down, fuel trucks and armor were forced onto a northern detour, a narrow, icy mountain route already jammed with traffic. Some vehicles ran out of fuel and had to be abandoned. Others couldn't turn around. The delays rippled outward. Day 4 came. The Meuse was still in Allied hands. Day 5 came. German armor was stalled everywhere. And once the weather cleared and American air power returned, the offensive began to bleed. What Hitler had gambled as a lightning strike was collapsing into a slow retreat. Momentum had died in the snow. No newspaper would ever say, "A compass helped stop a panzer advance." No historian would write a chapter about a frozen road without a name, but that didn't matter, because Levi and his men had done the one thing that wins wars, not glory, not noise. They bought time. Levi Conincaid never called himself a hero. After the war, he didn't tell the story often, not because he was ashamed, but because he didn't think it was special. He went home to Maine, back to the forests and quiet roads he understood. He worked in land management, married once, lived simply. The war became a memory that stayed behind his eyes but rarely reached his voice. In a small wooden drawer beside his bed, he kept the compass. It was scratched now, dented along the rim. The glass had a crack across one corner, and the needle still wobbled at first before correcting itself, just like it had in the Ardennes. He could have thrown it away. He never did. He didn't keep it as a souvenir. He kept it as a reminder, not of the tanks he stopped or the road he defended, but of a choice he made. A moment in the snow when a frightened young German soldier dropped to his knees and raised his hands, when Levi could have pulled the trigger, could have given rage and fear what they wanted, and didn't. The war didn't remember that moment. The reports didn't mention it, but Levi did. He understood something most men never learn until it's too late. The war isn't just decided by who fires first. Sometimes it's decided by the one who thinks before firing, the one who recognizes the thin line between necessity and cruelty and chooses to stay human anyway. Levi never saw himself as remarkable, but what he carried, the patience to plan, the courage to act, and the restraint to stop, was rarer than medals. It was clarity. It was discipline. It was direction. A man doesn't need a famous story to matter. Sometimes the only compass you need is doing the small right thing when it counts, and that changes everything. So now, I'll leave you with this. Levi Conincaid wasn't famous. He didn't lead a charge or plant a flag or change the course of history alone. He just trusted something small, a so-called stupid idea, and refused to let anyone shake his belief in it. Because sometimes the thing that saves you isn't what other people believe in. Sometimes it's what you carry. Maybe it's a worn notebook full of scribbles no one else understands. Maybe it's a line of music you hum when life tries to break you. Maybe it's a promise you made years ago and refused to forget. Or maybe, like Levi, it's a simple tool that nobody else took seriously until it mattered. So here's the question. What have you carried through life that others doubted but turned out to be your advantage? Tell me in the comments. And if Levi's story moved you, not just as history but as a reminder of what quiet courage looks like, share it, because stories like his don't belong to the past. They point us forward.